Hare Krishna, welcome to the daily Srimad Bhagavatam class from the Bhakti Centers channel. It's my pleasure to welcome back Madan Gopal Prabhu from ISKCON of New Jersey, which is currently the Tobacco Temple, but they are building that beautiful Parsippany temple that you see behind his back. And it'll be ready sometime next year, actually. So stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting Vedic temple that's coming up, and Madan Gopal Prabhu is very heavily involved in the fundraising and planning and logistics for it, in addition to the many other duties he does for ISKCON, including being Director of Communications for North America, serving under Anuttama Prabhu, who is the worldwide head of communications. And in addition, he's the Vice President of that temple of ISKCON of New Jersey, and does so many other services, including teach Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and other wonderful literatures. So very excited to have him on our channel. Without any further ado, Madan Gopal Prabhu, please enlighten us.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Yashodhala Prabhu and all the devotees of Bhakti Center for very kindly inviting me once again on this very exalted forum of very progressive devotees. So my obeisances to all of you. Hare Krishna. So this morning we will be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's see if this works over here. I can share my screen. Okay. So today we shall be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 20. All right, so I think it's this one over here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we'll dive right into the verses. Canto 9, Chapter 20, texts 14 through 15. Asyatam hyaravindaksha grihyatam arhanam chana bhujyatam santi nivara ushyatam yadirochate. So this is Shakuntala Devi speaking. She says, O king, with eyes like petals of a lotus, kindly come sit down and accept whatever reception we can offer. We have a supply of Nivara rice that you may kindly take. And if you so desire, stay here without hesitation. Shri Dushmanta Uvacha Upapannam idam subhru Jataya kushikanvaye Swayam hi vrunute ragyam Kanyaka sadrisham varam. King Dushmanta replied, O Shakuntala, with beautiful eyebrows you have taken your birth in the family of the great saint Vishwamitra, and your reception is quite worthy of your family. Aside from this, the daughters of a king generally select their own husbands. The purport to this verse, Prabhupada says, in her reception of Maharaj Dushmant, Shakuntala clearly said, Your Majesty may stay here, and you may accept whatever reception I can offer. Thus she indicated that she wanted Maharaj Dushmant as her husband. As far as Maharaj Dushmant was concerned, he desired Shakuntala as his wife from the very beginning, as soon as he saw her. So the agreement to unite as husband and wife was natural. To induce Shakuntala to accept the marriage, Maharaj Dushmant reminded her that as a daughter of a king, she could select her husband in an open assembly. In the history of Aryan civilization, there have been many instances in which famous princesses have selected their husbands in open competitions. For example, it was in such a competition that Sita Devi accepted Lord Ramchandra as her husband. and that Draupadi accepted Arjuna, and there are many other instances. So marriage by agreement or by selecting one's own husband in an open competition is allowed. There are 8 kinds of marriage, of which marriage by agreement is called Gandharva marriage. Generally, the parents select the husband or wife for the daughter or son. But Gandharva marriage takes place by personal selection. Still, although marriage by personal selection or by agreement took place in the past, we find no such thing as divorce by disagreement. Of course, divorce by disagreement took place among low-class men, but marriage by agreement was found even in the very highest classes, especially in the royal Kshatriya families. Maharaj Dushman's acceptance of Shakuntala as his wife was sanctioned by Vedic culture. How the marriage took place is described in the next verse. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, who has opened my darkened eyes and filled my heart with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I further offer my obeisances to all of you assembled Vaishnavas who have kindly gathered here and seek your blessings and permission to recite Srimad Bhagavatam. So thank you once again for joining this morning as we explore this fascinating story of Shakuntala. The story of Shakuntala is so amazing. And then we find it in detail. We find it in summary in the Bhagavatam in this section. We find a lot of detail in the Mahabharata. And of course, there's a very elaborate drama written by Kalidas Kavi, a great, he's like the Shakespeare of the Sanskrit world, Kalidas. And he wrote an incredible Sanskrit drama on the story of Shakuntala. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the story of Shakuntala, I can just give a brief synopsis of it. So, long time ago, there used to be a sage by the name of Vishwamitra. Now, Vishwamitra is actually his own complex story, but he was a king who wanted to be very powerful, and so he took on the process of meditation, and he was actually pretty successful at it. But his goal was to control, heavens and things like that. So his goals are materialistic, but he took on this process of meditation, doing very intense austerities, and he wanted to become a Brahma Rishi, like a very highly placed Rishi, by dint of his own brute force meditation. And because he was getting very good at it, Lord Indra, who was feeling very insecure that if this fellow becomes so powerful, he'll kick me out of my kingdom and I'll lose my kingdom. So I better ruin his meditation soon. So then he sent a very famous, very beautiful Apsara, the heavenly damsels, who are known for their beauty. In fact, it's described Apsaras in heavens are so beautiful that even the most beautiful women on earth look like lizards by comparison. So that's how it's described. So he sent Menaka, who was a very famous dancer in the heavens, to distract Vishwamitra and kind of break his continuity of the meditation. And she was actually pretty successful. And so he ended up getting married to Menaka. Vishwamitra and Menaka, they lived together for a few years, and then a daughter was born to them. This is the birth of Shakuntala. So now, Vishwamitra later, after daughter was born, and he was sort of settled in kind of family life, he realized that these are Indra's tricks. So he got upset, and he felt that, I should go and meditate again. I should recontrol my emotions, my weaknesses, and so on. So he left Menaka. And then Menaka is like, all right, what am I going to do here? I don't really belong here. I came here for Vishwamitra, and he's leaving me. So Menaka left her daughter Shakuntala at the at the ashram of one Muni, name of Rishi Kanva. So he left her at the hermitage of Rishi Kanva. And she also then went back to her heavens, back to her where she was. Now the Rishi Kanva found this baby in his hermitage, and he found the baby was surrounded by this bunch of birds, beautiful birds called Shakunta birds, and they're protecting her. And so he gave her the name Shakuntala. Shakuntala means one who's protected by the Shakunta birds. So of course he was maintaining her, raised her like his own daughter. And then one fine day, the king Dushmant, he was traveling to the forest with his army, and he was pursuing a deer, and he saw this incredibly beautiful young lady, Shakuntala, and he fell in love with her. Of course, Dushyant himself was also very good looking. You can note that in today's verse, Shakuntala calls him lotus-eyed. Arvindaksha, she refers to him as Arvindaksha. So, when she was referring to him as that means she'd also fallen in love with him. So it was mutual. They fell in love with each other, and they got married as per the Gandharva process. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that briefly in today's purport. The Gandharva means they just kind of accept each other. You don't need permission from anybody else. You don't need permission from the parents. You just get married because you fell in love with each other, and that's that. So as we progress through this chapter, Srila Prabhupada explained how these different kinds of marriages work out. And of course, the next verse gives the detail of how this marriage took place. So, they get married, and for some reason or another, the king goes back to his kingdom, and he says, I'll come back for you, or something like that. He doesn't take her right away to the kingdom. But he gives her his ring, his royal ring with the royal seal on it, his personal ring, as a promise that I'm going to bring you back to the palace once I go back and sort things out. So Shakuntala is sad, but she has some sense of confidence that she has the ring. So she would spend her days, daydreaming about her king, and it's natural. And one day, very famous, or say notorious sage Durvasa Muni, he's very notorious or famous for just getting upset at everything, and cursing left and right. So one day she was supposed to serve him, but naturally, because she was daydreaming, she was kind of spaced out. So instead of giving attention to her guest, Durvasa Muni, and serving him food and things like that, she was distracted, and she failed to greet him properly, because he's come, right? So Durvasa Muni obviously gets upset, and he curses Shakuntala, saying that whoever you were daydreaming of, you're thinking so deeply of this person, whoever that is, that person will forget about you altogether. He'll forget that you even exist. So that was a pretty scary curse, because it's a difficult position Shakuntala is in, right? She is away from her husband, and he hasn't even declared to the rest of the world. Who knows if he's announced it or not, that she's married to him, and so on. And now if he forgets about her, that's pretty shocking. So as Durvasa Muni was departing in a fit of rage, one of Shakuntala's friends who heard this curse, she ran after him and said, "Please, Maharaj, don't do that. Shakuntala, it's natural for her to be daydreaming. Her husband is away, and this is her situation." So then Durvasa, he did realize that the curse was a bit much. So he gave a workaround, or a way out. He said, I'm going to modify my curse, that if the person who had forgotten Shakuntala through the curse, he would remember everything if she just showed him a symbol or a personal token that he had given her. So that's a way out. So she had his ring, and she'd wear his ring on her own hand. So then she had a way out of the curse, right? So then Shakuntala in due course of time, gives birth to a boy who was the son of King Dushmant. Right? And she's wondering why he didn't come. And so she set out for the capital city. And on the way, they had to cross the river by boat, by canoe. And so she was, keeping the boy with her, and then in the boat, and she was seeing the beautiful water, and she said, "Oh, such nice water." And she is putting her hand through the water, and unfortunately, the ring slipped off her hand. Naturally, because the ring is a little bit bigger than her own finger, she had to take a little more care of it, but the ring slipped off her hand. She didn't even realize it. And she was so excited to see the king. And she arrived at King Dushyant's court, but because of the curse, Dushyant didn't even recognize her. So she said, "This is your son. Look how he looks just like you." And the king's like, "No, go away, woman. I don't even know you. Why are you bringing this boy in front of me? Who is this boy?" So she was obviously very hurt. She tried to remind him that she's his wife, but she started looking for a ring. She couldn't find it, and Dushyant did not recognize her. Dushmant, right? So she was very humiliated, and she returned to the forest, and then she settled in some section of the forest just by herself, and then she raised her son. And her son's name was Bharat Maharaj. So Bharat, of course, being a very powerful personality, even as he grew up, he would play with these animals in the forest. Like he would actually subdue lions and tigers and things like that, even though he was just a little boy. And he would open their mouths and count their teeth and stuff like that, and they couldn't do anything to him because he was so strong. So meanwhile, what happened? A fisherman, he found the royal ring inside the belly of a fish that he had caught. So then he said, "Wow, this is a royal ring. I mean, this shouldn't be out in public like that." So he took it to the palace of the king, and as soon as Dushman saw the ring, the memories of his wife came back, rushing back, and he's like, "Oh my God, what happened? I can't believe I forgot about her." So then he immediately set out to find her, and then he arrived at her father's ashram, and he realized, wait, she's not at the Rishi's ashram. So then he continued looking in the forest, and he was surprised to see this incredibly powerful young boy. He had pried open the mouth of a lion, was like counting the teeth of the lion. And he was quite astounded. So the king greeted the boy and asked his name. And the name said, "My name is Bharat, son of King Dushmant. Who are you?" And of course, then the whole family is reunited, and Dushmant accepted the boy and later on crowned him to be the king. So this is a very incredible story. It's captures the imagination. All kinds of intrigue is in it. There's romance, and there's chivalry, and there's forgetfulness, there's curses. It's a short, quick story, the way, just kind of summarized it, but there's lots of details in it. So one may ask, what does this have to do with Krishna? Right? It's a nice story, sure. But it's important to remember that Srimad Bhagavatam is about Krishna. Everything in the Srimad Bhagavatam connects us to Krishna very quickly and very deeply. The stories of Srimad Bhagavatam are not merely allegories. They are histories. They happened. And at the same time, only those stories that are relevant in history are mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Relevant means what? Those stories that can strengthen our Krishna consciousness. So everything in the Bhagavatam connects us to Krishna. And if we cannot immediately see the connection, then not to worry. We just read the purports. That's what Srila Prabhupada has done for us. Srila Prabhupada ensures that we see the connection and relevance, which is why we should not skip the purports. We should read them. And so there's quite a few ways where even these two verses that we read, they connect to Krishna, or practice of Krishna consciousness and how we can apply it in our lives. So I'm going to kind of revisit the purport again. All right. So here Prabhupada says that in a reception to Maharaj Dushman, Shakuntala said, "Your Majesty may stay here. You may accept whatever reception I can offer." Right. So then she indicated that she wanted Maharaj Dushman as her husband, and then of course Dushman wanted to marry her. And then Srila Prabhupada gives some framework of the kinds of marriage. So in this framework, we understand history of Aryan civilization. There have been many instances in which famous princesses have selected their husbands in open competitions. So now this notion that a woman has the right to choose her own husband, that's an ancient notion. It's part of great civilization, the Aryan civilization. And then Srila Prabhupada gives examples of other stories that we're familiar with. So now he connects this explanation and he brings in the picture of Lord Ram and Sita, Ramchandra and Sita Devi. So right away he connects us with Krishna, even though that particular verse is not directly talking about Ram and Sita, but Srila Prabhupada draws the parallels as he's giving explanation. So as we read the purport, we are immediately connected with Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada is training us also on how to connect the thought of Krishna with the verses that we're reading, even though they may not be, so-called directly connected. You see, so here he's saying this is one way to think about, one way to understand. When you're trying to think through the various kinds of marriage and all that, because when we read a verse, all these different thoughts do come up. Wait, what kind of marriage is this? I thought it's only it's an arranged marriage thing, and the parents generally select the husband and wife. But here we're seeing that they're kind of selecting, the wife, or the princess is selecting her own husband. And so Prabhupada says, yeah, that was normal. And look at Lord Ram and Sita. So now our heart is filled with the image of Lord Ram and Sita. Of course, then he also brings in Draupadi and Arjuna, who are great devotees in their own right, and that brings up whole memories of Krishna again. We have so many stories of Draupadi with Krishna, and Krishna saving her, in the assembly with unlimited sari, and Arjuna, the pure devotee, who's the main person Krishna speaking to in the Bhagavad Gita. So even just by mentioning a little bit of that, we get connected, and all this flood of memories of Krishna and Lord Ram come into our heart. So this is one way to always remember that whenever reading any stories or even a philosophical point, we are only one step away from Krishna. Everything is directly connected in the Bhagavatam to Krishna. Okay, so then he gets into the 8 kinds of marriage. One of them is called Gandharva marriage, and so on. And then another angle, say we continue this purport, and Srila Prabhupada continues, and he says that generally parents select the husband or wife for the daughter or son, but Gandharva marriage takes place by personal selection. Although marriage by personal selection or by agreement took place in the past, we find no such thing as divorce by disagreement. So now Srila Prabhupada here he's giving some practical advice. The general principle is that we should not, when we make a commitment to get married, it should be done with a great deal of seriousness, and we should make every attempt to make the marriage work. We should certainly, for the peace of society and the peace of the world, we should not be, jumping to divorce as like a first, course of action. In fact, it should be like such a almost unacceptable thing. He would say, should not even consider divorce. Learn to work it out. So he would make that point over here. But at the same time, he says that, okay, they did have divorces, but that was not the highest class of behavior. And so he does make a point that when we take marriage, when we accept a husband or a wife, we should take it with utmost seriousness, and you don't take it whimsically, And so, he makes the sociological point, and he's also making a practical point for the peace of society in general, that we take marriage with seriousness, put Krishna in the center, and so on. So there's different angles and different ways Srila Prabhupada connects these stories or these messages of Srimad Bhagavatam to Krishna, and also practical application in our lives as we're trying to navigate the very complex world of our material conditioning, of our modern society, and while still trying to add Krishna to our lives. So the purports kind of invite us to think along these lines as we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam. And we will find the more we read Srila Prabhupada's purports, then as we read Srimad Bhagavatam and you read a verse, we may even be able to predict, I bet Srila Prabhupada is going to mention this point in the purport. And sure enough, you look in the purport and he'll mention that point. So then we also find ourselves getting more in tune with how Srila Prabhupada wants us to think when we're going through Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so on. Because whenever we read something, there is a way of thinking about it. And when we read Srila Prabhupada's purport, we get an incredibly beautiful glimpse on how we should process, what perspective, what context we should try to see the message that we just learned from the original text. Now, we read Srimad Bhagavatam and we read Bhagavad Gita. So I sometimes use this analogy that Bhagavad Gita is like vitamins, It has the essential points of philosophy in a very compact package. But Srimad Bhagavatam is like a full nutritious meal, and we need both. We need the vitamins to supplement, and we need the full nutritious meal as well for all the energy and everything else, So we do need to make sure that our fundamentals of the philosophy are very solid. At the same time, we need to fully nourish our consciousness with the beautiful stories and infused with the pastimes, of course, of the Lord, of his devotees, of the various ups and downs that they had. But it nourishes our heart, our spirit. Another analogy is like learning a new language. If you want to learn a language, there's the grammar textbook, which is the essence of how grammar is laid out, But once you've learned the basic grammar, then what do you do with it? Then you want to then apply that understanding, and you can get better at learning a new language by then reading histories and news and articles and so on. So then not only are you understanding or strengthening your understanding of the grammar as you read more, you'll find all the rules of the grammar coming through in these histories and news articles. At the same time, you'll also learn some of the nuances of how the language works. You learn the culture behind the language and the culture from which the language came from. And you also learn about some of the exceptions to the rules of the grammar and so on. So similarly, we should also really get into Srimad Bhagavatam as much as possible and understand how the philosophy is applied purely. Srimad Bhagavatam is a collection of texts written in the maturity of Vyasadeva. Right? So in fact, what Srimad Bhagavatam is described in the second verse of the Bhagavatam itself. It says, Dharma projita kaitavatra paramo nirmatsara nam satam vedyam vastavamatra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim va Pareirishvara Sadhya Hridya Varudhyate Trakritivi Shushrushavi Stakshanat. That completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any of the scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of the Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. And so the Bhagavatam is the foundation of everything. In fact, when Mahaprabhu was asked what is the essence of all truth, what is the summary of Krishna consciousness, Mahaprabhu says he gives the opinion that Aradhyo Bhagavan Vajeshitanaya Tadhama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachidupasana Vrajavadu Vargenaya Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumartho Mahan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhur Matamidam Tatradara Napara. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the son of Nanda Maharaj, is to be worshipped along with his transcendental abode, Vrindavan. So this is the essence of truth. What is Krishna consciousness? You worship Krishna, who is the son of Maharaj Nanda, in his abode, Vrindavan. And the most pleasing form of worship, the highest form of worship of that Lord, is that done by the gopis of Vrindavan. And how am I supposed to apply or understand this philosophy? Well, Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless authority on everything. So if you want to understand, read Bhagavatam. And Prema Pumartha Mahan, the highest goal, ultimate goal for everyone is pure love of God. And this is a statement, these statements for which we have the highest regard are the opinion of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it is the foundation of our understanding of how the world works, who we are, what is the purpose and goal of our life. Krishna. It's about Krishna and how we can achieve that goal. So we can see that Bhagavatam is our ultimate Praman, the source of truth, and we should stick to this reading regularly Srimad Bhagavatam, and certainly read Srila Prabhupada's purports. Why? Because everything in the Bhagavatam connects us to Krishna very quickly and very deeply. And if we lose track of that point, we should go back and read Srila Prabhupada's purports, and he will show us how we can see this connection. So I'll pause over here. If anybody has any comments or questions, we can have some discussion. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Madana Gopal Prabhu. Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. Okay, do we have a question or a comment or reflection from the audience?
Adi Purush Prabhu.
Fantastic class. Very, very wonderful. What comes across is not just your wisdom, your spiritual masters empowering you in a wonderful way, but your sincerity. You know, we see your humility, your faith and confidence. And when we hear a class and the speakers help us to bring what's spoken about right into the room and remind us how wonderful is Krishna, that this verse is about glorifying the Lord. Because sometimes we get lost in the details. People speak about so many things and they forget about, but what about Krishna? How does this relate to the Lord and our, the goal of life, and how to get close to Krishna, how to please Krishna. And the unspoken, of course, this is Srila Prabhupada explains this very carefully, that the marriages go on and people are attracted and connect through different varieties of marriages. But then for the marriage to endure in a harmonious way, then both members, if there is encouragement in faith, encouragement in sadhana, encouragement in obedience to the spiritual master, and encouragement in engaging in devotional service in the sense of presenting Krishna consciousness to others, that marriage will be successful and the love will grow and grow. But on the other hand, if the marriage is just an arrangement for mutual sense enjoyment, then people will lose respect for each other. They'll lose respect for themselves, and they'll fight like cats and dogs, and they'll be miserable. So those are the two directions you can go in. But thank you very much. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for that point about marriage as well. Very important point. Gail has a question. Go ahead, Gail.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I was just interested in you comparing the CC and the Bhagavatam, because we hear that the CC describes the mind of Krishna, the Bhagavatam describes the activities of Krishna, but it seems like both of them, you're using that grammar analogy, they both seem to illustrate the devotional activities of Krishna's devotees. Of course, Krishna mostly from the perspective of his being a devotee. But so I'm just saying that if you could just elaborate or illuminate this comparison for me between Bhagavatam and CC, how they are alike, how they're different.
Yeah, that's a very deep and involved question. Because if you look at the size of the Bhagavatam, you look at the size of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, they are massive in size. And there are so many parallels. And of course, the high level comparison which you highlighted is that Chaitanya Charitamrita is like the heart and the mind of Lord Krishna. And we get the inner feelings of Krishna in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The beautiful thing is, and if we read the purports, even if we read purports of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada quotes Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. And you read the purports of Bhagavatam, Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so on. And Chaitanya Charitamrita itself has strings of quotes from Srimad Bhagavatam, not from the purports. Mahaprabhu himself quotes chunks of the Bhagavatam in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mahaprabhu himself and other great devotees, they're quoting the Bhagavatam. So they are very much intertwined with each other. But the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is a reason why it is described as being the next or the postdoctoral study after the Bhagavatam. Even though it contains everything, and in and of itself, if one studies Chaitanya Charitamrita, you pretty much get everything that you need. But it is very advanced. Now, why is it advanced? Is it the grammar of the Bengali that's advanced? Is it the word order? Is it that the certain kind of vocabulary is very hi-fi or something? No, it's not. In fact, if you look at the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the language is very simple. Even an average village Bengali can understand and grasp the message of Chaitanya. At least they can, in the sense that there is no ambiguity of the wording. Then why is it considered so advanced? It is considered advanced because it is very difficult to fathom the activities of Mahaprabhu and the activities of ecstasy demonstrated by the Lord's devotees. I mean, there's some very far out things that they do in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's very hard to understand why they do them. If you read, how they would dance and how they would faint and how they would embrace each other and how they would stay up all night and chant. And sometimes we get a glimpse when we attend our own kirtans and programs that, oh wow, there's so much nectar here. Now I can sort of understand why they would dance and chant all night. And then they'd go out all day in the morning and go out and chant on the streets also. So we get some glimpses, but some of the interactions and the feelings are so advanced we can't understand them, which is why it is explained that it is the postdoctoral.
Prabhu, couldn't we say something similar when we see the activities of the gopis described in the Bhagavatam?
Yeah, definitely. That is true. The Bhagavatam is also very advanced, but the Chaitanya Charitamrita is considered even more advanced. Where a lot of the advanced devotees, pure devotees in the Chaitanya Charitamrita are themselves gopis or manjaris. And how does that work? It's very hard to fathom. But at the same time, we're told to read Chaitanya Charitamrita and to understand in that context. And if there's something we can't fathom, we can accept it as, we're not quite there yet. Like in mathematics, if we're taught that, what is 4 minus 5? Well, you can't really minus this from that. We're not there yet. We haven't got to the point of negative numbers yet. So we can accept that, okay, at some point we'll get there. So we can read with that understanding. But the best thing...
Can you think off the cuff, of an example of a pastime that's in the CC that is more unfathomable than any pastime you would have found in the Bhagavatam?
Wow.
To making it more advanced, therefore.
Yeah, some of them are pretty far out. I remember this one time there was a story of the devotees where they're getting so much ecstasy, and one devotee starts suckling the breast of another devotee, and then they get in the mood of Krishna, breastfeeding from Mother Yashoda, something like that. That's pretty far out. It's hard to understand how that's going on. Like if you were to see that, we won't see that in New York Rath Yatra for sure.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I've always been bewildered by that one.
You asked for it. So.
No more questions, Prabhu.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe, we should ask for, because you might get it. Yeah. But thank you. Yeah, it is pretty advanced. But at least we're very fortunate that we have Srila Prabhupada to help us understand, temper our foolishness or our lack of understanding with his purports.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may add,
For now.
If I may add something, Gail, this might help you. Years ago, Satyaraj Prabhu, the famous author Stephen Rosen, Satyaraj Prabhu told me, he said, Bhagavad Gita is the instructions of Shri Krishna, and instructions are to practice devotional service. Srimad Bhagavatam tells us or shows us what is devotional service, and Chaitanya Charitamrita shows us how to practice devotional service and what we can do in our life. And he said the understanding gets progressively deeper, and you need to marinate in it to actually get what the CC is trying to tell you. So maybe some of the more esoteric pastimes don't apply to us, but how to practice bhakti, Mahaprabhu tells us in so many different ways, stay where you are, remain in your occupation, in your daily duties, add Krishna to your life. And ultimately the goal is that we want to become completely mad in love for Krishna. But Chaitanya Charitamrita shows us how to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. That's nice. And I like the use of your word marinate, because Chaitanya Charitamrita is full of descriptions of cooking and different kinds of preparations and stuff like that. You can marinate in that really deeply, because so many details of what vegetable and how it is cooked, and what ghee and the rice and sweet rice and different kinds of like yogurt rice and chipped rice festival description. So that's an incredible way to meditate, on serving the Lord, and it's really far up. We can apply. So. Yeah, thank you for that. Though it's a great discussion. Thank you, Shadal Prabhu, as well.
Yeah, just sort of Dulal's comment, Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. What to do, then doing it, and then what happens to you when you do it? What your experience is. Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Yes.
Where's the Prabhupada?
Relationship, the process, and then the result of that.
The result, the experience.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Adi Purush Prabhu, runs the feeding the homeless seva that he's done for years and years. Anyone and everyone who's inspired to join, please join. It's Anand Bihari Prabhu can put the details in the chat of how people can join in. And Adi Purush Prabhu, probably you haven't missed a Bhagavatam class in 50 years, huh? You've definitely marinated in Bhagavatam and CC.
I need it more than anyone.
Yes. Thank you.
We're not just feeding the homeless, we're giving Krishna's prasadam, and it's Krishna's program, not mine. Well, goes to Prabhupada.
Madam Gopal Prabhu, I have a question. I noticed you mentioned progressive devotees. Every time you give class here, you say this word, progressive devotees. Can you tell us what it takes to be a progressive devotee? And are there any devotees that aren't progressive enough, or maybe retrograde? Because I feel like I'm one of them, not progressive enough, slacking on everything. Can you tell us, please?
It's a great point. We are generally taught to be non-judgmental. Who am I to judge someone's level of advancement? Who am I to judge who is a great devotee, who is not a great devotee? Right? At the same time, the nectar of instruction very clearly asks us to form a judgment. Very clearly.
Discriminate.
Yeah. The word discriminate has a lot of negative connotations, but Srila Prabhupada uses always in a positive way, almost always, at least in this context. Why? If you want to shop for gold and you go to the market, you should have at least some basic understanding of what gold is. Otherwise, you'll buy something else. You'll buy fool's gold. If you go to a cloth shop, go to Home Depot, and you buy a brass fitting that looks like gold. Oh, wow, look at this deal on gold. It's like a Black Friday deal or something. You know, I got this piece of gold, looks like a bolt, and it's like weighs so much, and I got it for like $350, you know. So if we don't know what gold is, we will be cheated for superficial understanding of it. Similarly, when we seek advancement in spirituality, we should have at least a basic understanding of where to find it. So, which is why then what am I going to do? I've heard Rupa Goswami is a great devotee or a great philosopher, so maybe he must have published something that'll give me some guidance. Here it is, nectar of instruction. First verse, Vachavega Manasakrodha. Oh, first verse means this person is qualified to be guru. Fine, okay, very nice. 6 qualities. Next thing, these 6 items are very conducive for Krishna consciousness. Then, there are 3 grades of devotees. You should learn to identify those 3 grades. And when you identify them, they're based on these 3 sets of qualifications or symptoms, which are fairly easily recognizable. If you see their behavior falls in one of these 3 categories, then you approach them in 3 different ways. So the lowest category is Kanishta. You should understand that person. He understands that Krishna is God. He sees Krishna as God in the temple, but he doesn't see the Lord in others' hearts. He doesn't behave with others very nicely. He doesn't recognize that. So we can see some behavior of a person. If he's very harsh, very rough, very, this is not a right person, or at least I wouldn't be happy if I was treated like that he's treating other people. But he's a devotee. So then how are we supposed to approach that person? Offer respect from a distance. That's what he says. So we still offer respect. From a distance means don't be influenced by that person. Right? That's the whole point of from a distance. You keep your distance. But the next person who's very progressive means you can see that person is very sincere, has a very solid understanding of philosophy, knows how to interact with other people very nicely, and really takes care of his own growth, and the sincerity just shines forth. That person I want to be friends with. So you want to be friends with that person, develop friendship, try to be influenced by that person. At the same time, this way you'll grow, and that person is still growing, but the momentum of that person's progress will help us progress. And then, of course, the highest level is one who is fully dedicated to Krishna consciousness, fully addicted to Krishna. His every moment is spent in how to spread Krishna consciousness to others. There's no question of him changing his mind about Krishna consciousness. His philosophy is so strong, every word he speaks makes our faith stronger in Krishna. That person I want to serve. I want to learn from that person, inquire from that person. So the 3 different angles and approaching 3 different categories, but we should be able to at least determine what category a person is. Therefore, I use the term progressive devotees, meaning that, the second category and the first category, those are the ones who will pull us upward. But we still respect the other devotees.
Thank you, Madam Gopal Prabhu. Okay, do we have any further questions or reflections? Comments? We can take one more.
I just want to quickly add that I appreciated just I appreciated just now your definition of keeping devotees at a distance, meaning we don't want to be influenced by them. So thank you for spelling that out, what that means.
Yeah, that's what the essence of association is, right? Association means we don't allow ourselves to be influenced by that person. When we're told, oh, we should not associate with non-devotees, doesn't mean that, okay, we don't ask the person at the bus stop when the next bus is coming. Oh, he's a non-devotee. You can't ask him what time the next bus is coming because that's association. That's not association. People think like that, right? We should. What association means is we open our hearts to that influence. See, Athena has her hand up.
Hare Krishna, Madana, Gopal, Prabhu, Dandavats. I love your sessions. They're always so crisp, potent, and your storytelling is wonderful. I'll just share just my initial thoughts. First, I just can't believe Durvasa Muni. I mean, I'm just blown away. Just his anger, cursing a poor woman for just not receiving him properly. I guess that arrogance and the ego. But I guess it's all part of the pastime. But also, I love how really all the stories connect, because I don't, you always hear about Bharat Maharaj, but you don't know the whole backstory. And it's very, very fascinating. But I guess some other thoughts that came to mind, and it's just things for me to marinate more on. Well, one, not to contradict what Adi Purusha Prabhu had said, of course, when we put Krishna in the center, marriages, flourish. But you do see that there are even that of people we know, devotee relationships that don't work out when divorces happen, even when they are such deep devotees putting Krishna in the center. And I that just makes me, contemplate that we exist on so many dimensions. And while spiritual is the highest, there are personalities, there are natures, there's past conditionings and baggage, and we still have to work through that. So the reality is, there's work to be done on other dimensions too, because it's not always
let them answer. Let them answer. That's
sorry.
very, very serious, grave question. Let them answer. Madame Gopal Prabhu and Adipusha Prabhu, what do you say to that?
It's a good question. Adi Purush Prabhu, go ahead.
Well, it's a functional definition. If your only desire is to please Krishna, and if you've committed by Krishna's arrangement to working with a particular person, then you use a very good word, work through. Sometimes Krishna presents something, not what we expected, not what we understand, not what we would prefer, but he presents us with a situation that's challenging. I cannot deal with this person. I cannot deal with this person with the skills I have right now. Therefore, I must develop new skills. Krishna's given me a situation where I must learn and grow. And of course, you can give up the endeavor, or you can turn to Krishna and Guru and Shastra and work through. You used a very good word there. Work through. Relationships take work. And that means keeping Krishna in the center. And it's a fact that if a relationship, it just doesn't work out, because it doesn't work out because I'm not thinking of Krishna. I'm thinking me. And the other person thinking me. And then what have you got? Contentiousness. Madana Gopal, please, what would you say? That's all I can say.
I'd say that's the essence of it, that relationships require work. Just as much as our relationship with Krishna requires work. Our relationship with Krishna is also broken. We have chosen to turn away from him. We're in the habit of turning away from the sources of our love. We're in the habit of it. So we can't break that habit very easily. Also, we're in a Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is described, Prayan alvayusha sabhya kalavasmin yugejana manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya hibhadrata. That Prayan alpayusha, we have a very short life. Kalavasmin, and we're very weak-minded, we're weak in body, we're weak in intelligence, and above all, we're always disturbed. Everything disturbs us. The smallest thing irritates us. Why? Because there is a dearth of happiness in our lives. There's dearth of happiness in our family lives. Even when we take to family life while we are trying to make sincere progress in Krishna consciousness, if we do not saturate our family life with happiness, family life will become miserable. Now, is a very interesting, I invite you in this particular topic to read in the Bhagavad Gita. There's a section, the 12th chapter, from verse 8 through 12, right? I think it's 12th chapter. Actually 13th chapter, sorry, from verses 8 through 12. And in that section, Krishna describes a list of items that are items of knowledge. And one of those items of knowledge, he says, like amanitam adambitam, pridelessness, so on. One of those items, Krishna says, detachment from children, wife, family, etc. Should give up or be detached from it, right? So sometimes our devotees, or we may misapply that directive, which is why you go to the purport. And actually, during my own wedding, it was conducted by Ravindra Sarup Prabhu. Ravindra Sarup Prabhu read from this section, and he said, you should read this part. And he read it out. He paused the whole wedding, and he read this purport. And I'd like to read it. He says, as for detachment from children, wife, and home, it is not meant that one should not have feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection. But when they're not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. Then Prabhupada gives the secret sauce of infusing our family life with happiness. He says the best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's one thing. 2, accept the remnants of food offered to Krishna. 3, have some discussion on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And 4, engage oneself in deity worship. These 4 things will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. Family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together. And then he mentions the mantra again, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. If one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these 4 principles, there's no need to change from family life to renounced life. So my point is that a lot of the times we may tend to overcomplicate the application of Krishna consciousness in our lives. If we're not doing these 4 things, let's prioritize those and infuse, and then work around our differences and things like that. Then, of course, we all come from different backgrounds. We come from different baggages. Sometimes, we get married to each other as a part of our karma, where, we married to the enemy from our past life who had something to work out. And that happens. I know a lot of us are convinced of that, and I'm convinced of it too when we see some of these things. But at the same time, if we did these 4 things in all seriousness and sincerity, and if, of course, some stars do have to line up, not everything will align. But generally speaking, this formula works. But yeah, if you
tell us the formula again, tell us the 4 things.
The 4 things. They're in that purport in 13th chapter, verse number 8. Okay, so first one, chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra morning and evening. Second one, offer all you eat to Krishna, food, then you eat prasadam. Third, read Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita together as a family. And fourth, bow down to the deity, worship the deity, offer something, flower, incense, whatever. You have a deity in the house. And you don't have to have in the house. You go to the temple regularly, that's also fine. But if you do the 4 things as a family, then, especially if you do in the morning and evening, that kind of dissolves a lot of the problems. It is like, we live in Kali Yuga, right? So Kali Yuga is, saturated with, you can say carcinogens. Okay, carcinogens are cancer-causing chemicals in the environment. And so Kali Yuga is full of carcinogenic vibes. And so then you need to have a very strong anti-carcinogenic diet, which is high in antioxidants and the cancer-fighting nutrients and a lot of greens and colorful fruits and things like that. So if you have a strong diet, you have a good workout routine or something like that, and you try to keep as clean as possible, your chance of cancer reduce substantially. So similarly, if you're doing this morning and evening program, even if it's just a few minutes, but trying to come together, then even if you have misgivings and fights in between, those fights and misgivings are little cell cancer cells that need to be dissolved by the regular infusion of this highly nutritious spiritual activity. So if we're doing that, then the chances of getting a kind of terminal cancer, serious cancer, do go down. Doesn't mean it'll be zero, but it does substantially go down. So that's how biology works, and that's how psychology works, and that's how spiritual psychology works too.
Krishna has given me personal experience, specifically some of my god sisters, or who had trouble with husbands who had bad habits and things. And I've seen heroic Matajis, just the tolerance, the sincerity, the humility to hang in there with that relationship, to pray and to, care for the husband and to encourage and to share Krishna consciousness, to preach and work through the most disastrous, things that just look like this is never going to work. And they just hung in there by the grace of the Guru and Krishna. And they pulled that disturbing situation out of the fire. It can be done. And we can hear about those kind of people, and we can see those kind of people, and we can remember those kind of people, and we can take shelter of those kind of people. We can follow what they did. And of course, sometimes it's just not going to work. But I've seen some miracles, and it's based on this, on the grit, the determination, and the tolerance, and the forgiveness, and the wonderful, wonderful, loving effort by one member of the couple or the other to help the other one through a very dark, dark space. Krishna is amazing. Krishna is so wonderful that he can help you do the impossible, what seems impossible, if you just be patient and continue. But it takes work. Work. That's why they call it work.
Some of these devotee stories are so outstanding, and they're real heroes. I mean, they've tolerated decade after decade of impossible circumstances, and even turned around the lives completely of their spouse, of their husband or wife, completely. And they both end up becoming much greater devotees. It's really outstanding what devotees have gone through sometimes. And sometimes there is no choice, especially if it's an abusive situation. You're better off getting out of there before. So there's no question.
I'm in this marriage. I'm willing to die for my partner. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to help this person go back to God. That's the marriage agreement. I'm with you, and let's do it. Let's work on it. Let's get to the goal. Krishna will help us.
No, it's a good.
And to be fair, there are also lots of great examples of marriages. It's not always it takes work no matter what, no matter how compatible two people are in Krishna consciousness and in family life together. It's a lot of work. Don't believe Instagram and Facebook. If you just see those pictures, everything looks perfect and no disagreements. But that said, there are actually many, many examples in Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON of marriages which are a lot of fun and based around these four principles of Krishna consciousness. But it's not that they're boring, they're flat out depressing. They actually have a lot of fun together. We personally know a lot of such couples, from the first generation as well as the second generation. And it's inspiring because when you see that, you can apply those examples in your own life.
Don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up. And this one point that Prabhupada makes in this purport that I just read, the children and wife and husband, it's not that one should not have any feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection. Prabhupada said, don't go against your nature. So sometimes we try to deny our affection for them, which is very unhealthy and very messed up, actually, because we think, oh, this is Maya. It's not. Affection is a sign of a softening heart. Affection is not a sign of exploitation. Those are two different things. In fact, they're mutually opposite. Affection means taking care, having a softer heart for a person, and doing everything to make sure they do well. One should not suppress that at all. So we should definitely read the purports again and again. It's all in there. There's nothing hidden. We just have to see it. It's all writings on the wall. This is how to apply Krishna consciousness in our lives. It's not that hard to understand. Applying sometimes could be difficult, but And of course, there's another thing that if it says that by all means you should get married, because if you get a good wife, you'll be very happy, and if you get a very nagging or difficult wife, then you'll become a philosopher. So in any case, you're going to win, right? So.
We may think, I'm going to get away from this test Krishna giving me by getting rid of this spouse. The same test is going to come again. If I don't pass it, Krishna is going to send it again. And don't think that, I'm just going to avoid the test. There's something to learn here. This is something that Krishna is giving us. Yeah. Krishna loves us.
And Krishna knows whether we're going to pass the test or not, right? He doesn't give the test to see what grade we're going to get. He knows what grade we're going to get. He gives us a test for us to see what grade we're going to score. Anyway, so thank you very much for a wonderful discussion and your great insights. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Maran Gopal Prabhu. You really handled those questions really nicely in a very balanced and inspiring way. Thank you very much.
The spiritual master is empowering you.
Shri Prabhupada ki.
Yeah, tomorrow we have Adi Gadadhar Prabhu. Please join tomorrow morning.
Excellent.
If you can. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Madan Gopal Prabhu ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.